degree candidates, family members and friends, Provost Steele, faculty and colleagues of the School of Continuing Education, and distinguished guests, welcome to the 2011 school ceremony. On this occasion, we rejoice in the celebration of ideas and of people who exhibit the classic Columbia excellence, extraordinary minds, brilliant scholarship, and unparalleled potential. Our coming together this year marks SCE's 9th year as a Columbia school and the elaboration of SCE's renewed mission to transform knowledge and understanding in service of the greater good, which we define as a just, sustainable, and compassionate global society. We celebrate too in coming together today, advancement of the school's vision for the future, to be a leading model of 21st century higher education, building domains of cross-disciplinary expertise that give rise to and advance emerging and evolving professions. And this year, SCE advanced that mission with the launch of 2 new master's degrees in bioethics and sustainability management. This year, SCE also developed an innovative online learning platform that gives us the capability to connect students, faculty, and alumni through robust social media technologies and knowledge networks. With this platform, this coming fall, SCE will offer our first low residency master's degree to students near and far. These new foci represent the convergence of remarkable strands of change and innovation, growing as they do from our stewardship of Columbia's core values and ideals, those of advancing learning at the highest level and teaching students to frame their ideas within the context of the larger society. SCE students embrace and embody these principles in the fullest sense. Allow me to share a few examples. Michelle Jackson of the Negotiation and Conflict Resolution Program moved to Central Harlem several years ago. She was surprised by lack of access to fresh and healthy foods in local supermarkets, so she joined a local community garden. Her capstone project examines food systems and the links between poverty and the environment as a way to understand and resolve environmental injustice. The movement she helps to foster, called Food Justice, seeks ways to increase access to healthy, fresh foods in Central Harlem. Paul Jeffries of the Sports Management Program directs the City Soccer Initiative, which focuses on providing access to soccer within New York's underserved communities. His work brings rooftop soccer throughout the city. It's been featured in the Wall Street Journal and has received funding from the Manchester City Football Club and the United Arab Emirates. Lulwa Almana, whose graduate work is sponsored by the Saudi Arabian Cultural Mission, is not only studying landscape design, but sustainability management as well. She will take this knowledge back to the Middle East, where she plans to work toward developing an urban fabric of ecologically sustainable outdoor public spaces. Her goal is to improve the quality of urban life in that region of the world. Lydia McCarthy of the Information and Digital Resource Management Program emigrated from Brazil in 1990. Her final project explores the effects of resident non-involvement in large-scale municipal projects, resulting in deep ecological degradation of a major Brazilian city. Today, this research paper circulates among concerned Brazilian residents as a template for cultivating urban environmental awareness and forging a sense of shared civic identity and responsibility. Narrative medicine graduates, doctors Susan Ball and Shannon Arntfield, will be helping to lead a revolution in the education of future clinicians by developing narrative medicine curricula for medical students and residents. Their work will enhance cultural and bioethical competence, interpersonal communication skills, self-reflective practice, and the ability to work optimally with healthcare teams. SCE candidates, as these few examples show, you understand the power of education to change your lives and to improve the lives of others. And you have chosen to make it a priority. This year, Columbia will confer Master of Science degrees on 275 SCE students, the greatest number of graduates in the history of the school. SCE students are earning advanced degrees in 12 fields of study. In addition to the 5 programs you have already heard about, Columbia is conferring degrees on candidates in the programs of actuarial science, communications practice, construction administration, strategic communications, fundraising management, and technology management. And we rejoice that candidates will earn degrees for the first time in SCE's newest master's programs in narrative medicine and sustainability management. Degree candidates despite the varied academic careers you have pursued, you each embody a most powerful combination of elements. Each of you came to Columbia with purpose and urgency and a strong sense of the problems facing us in the 21st century. Each of you brought to Columbia a unique combination of intellectual talent, maturity, and a broad spectrum of experiences and accomplishments. Individually and collectively, you have enriched the discourse in SCE classrooms and across the university. Most importantly, when you leave Columbia, you will use your academic and intellectual gain to advance the public good. So, on this glorious day, we salute you, SCE students, on your commendable academic achievement. Thank you. In a moment, I will welcome to the podium Provost Claude M. Steele to deliver the salutation. But first, I would like to tell you a bit about Provost Steele. Claude Steele is Columbia's 21st provost, a position he assumed just under 2 years ago. Before coming to Columbia, he was the Lucy Stern Professor of Social Sciences at Stanford University, where he also served as director of the Center for Comparative Studies in Race and Ethnicity, and director of the Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences. Provost Steele is a professor of psychology who focused his research specifically on the experience of threats to the self and the consequences of those threats. At the University of Michigan and at Stanford University, he developed the theory of stereotype pressure or threat. He showed that the very act of exposing individuals to a stereotype has the power to cause underperformance. One of his earliest studies, he found that simply reminding a group of female math majors about to take a math test that women are considered naturally inferior to men in math impaired the women's performance. More importantly, he and his colleagues showed that removing the threat of the stereotype dramatically improved individuals' performance. His recent book, Whistling Vivaldi, and Other Clues to How Stereotypes Affect Us, is a stunning example of Claude Steele's commitment to the systematic application of social science to compelling and complex problems of society today. This work not only brings his research on ability stereotyped groups, it most importantly identifies specific ways to interrupt the troubled and disabling narrative of the stereotype, to develop interventions that strengthen a new narrative of belonging, and to reduce minority achievement gaps. Provost Steele's work has been published in numerous scholarly journals, and he is the recipient of many awards and distinctions for his research, teaching, and service. Please join me in welcoming Provost of Columbia University and Professor of Psychology, Claude M. Steele.
Thank you, Christine. That was a very gracious introduction. I would like to begin by just joining with the Dean and Columbia faculty and students and administrators in welcoming the parents, family, and friends of this graduating class of 2011. And then I would like to quickly also offer my heartiest congratulations to you graduates yourselves. I might note that I, for one, am especially impressed with continuing education graduates. It is one thing to recognize the value of a college education, but to someone my age, it's an even more impressive thing to recognize the value of continuing education. So to all of you here today who have shown this wisdom, I wish you a special congratulations. Graduations are very meaningful events for all parties involved, students, faculty, family, friends, and for the university. For students, it's an important signal that they have successfully completed the requirements for a degree that they've been working hard to earn. For the faculty, it is a signal that they have successfully transferred to yet another generation of scholars and practitioners the knowledge and skills of their discipline. To the family and friends, it's an opportunity to join in celebrating an important milestone in the life of a loved one. And for the university, it is a time when we welcome yet another group of individuals who until now have been immersed in a single program of study into the larger Columbia community. I can't help but recognize a certain similarity between your lives and mine. As Christine just noted, I'm a relatively new provost. I'm new to this job. And it represents a career change for me. Until now, with a few exceptions, for example, being a department chair and a Center Institute director, I have been primarily a faculty member, a researcher for the most part, and also a teacher. In fact, until last December, my career path was very representative of what one would have seen throughout the 20th century. Individuals who enter a single field and or assume a particular role and remain there throughout their entire working life. In my case, immediately after completing a bachelor's degree, I entered graduate school. I eventually earned a PhD in social psychology and moved into academia as a faculty member and remained in that role for the past 40 years. You, however, represent a new way in which careers are unfolding over the life cycle. No longer do the majority of people enter a field or a profession and remain there throughout their entire careers. In today's world, the doctor becomes a television commentator, the marketing executive becomes a fundraiser, the programmer becomes an entrepreneur, and so on. Earning a bachelor's degree in one field, working for a while in that area, and then moving on, often in a new area, that is the new career path of the 21st century. And it is just that you guys discovered that path a lot earlier than I did. There's also another way in which you are at the forefront of this new century, and that is in the interdisciplinarity of your fields. Some of the most exciting and important advances in knowledge are occurring at the intersection of disciplines. One has only to read the names of the programs in Columbia's School of Continuing Education to get a sense of the way in which interdisciplinarity is, in effect, the foundational concept of the school. Columbia School of Continuing Education is uniquely positioned to prepare people for this new world of work and career. It welcomes those who want to test new careers, those who want to add a second discipline to a base acquired in an earlier degree, those who want to position themselves for advancement in society's emerging interdisciplinary fields. We are grateful that you chose to come to Columbia in pursuit of these goals, and aspirations. You have enriched our academic community, and as alumni, you will continue to do so throughout your lives. We are proud of our School of Continuing Education and this mission that it pursues. It is an ambitious school, ambitious in just the right way, the way that adds inspiration and a sense of open possibility to life. That's what we're proud of. So I will close by again congratulating you and by wishing you both good luck and the kind of inspired life that is the mission of this school to foster. Thank you.
It now gives me great pleasure to introduce SCE's Class Day speaker. Seth W. Pinsky was appointed president of the New York City Economic Development Corporation by Mayor Michael Bloomberg in February of 2008. Only 7 months before the collapse of Lehman Brothers ushered in one of the most significant economic downturns in generations. In these last 3 years, Seth has worked relentlessly to meet the challenges presented by this crisis. His strategy is threefold: diversify the city's economy, help legacy industries transition to 21st century business models, and expand entrepreneurship to ensure that the city is well represented in the fields of tomorrow and positioned as the international center for innovation in the 21st century. And here's what he's accomplished. More than 60 programs launched during Mr. Pinsky's tenure focus on emerging industries such as the arts, bioscience, fashion, finance, green services, manufacturing, media, and technology. He has created incubator spaces for startup companies. He developed the city's first sponsored investment fund outside the Silicon Valley. And he implemented international competitions aimed at spurring the creation of new business models. Beyond rebuilding the economic base of New York City, Mr. Pinsky's efforts have included overseeing $2.5 billion in capital investments, ranging from basic infrastructure improvements to new parks and streetscapes across the city, and helping to negotiate and structure the city's involvement in some of the most complex development projects in recent years, including the World Trade Center, Yankee Stadium, and Citi Field. Under Mr. Pinsky, the EDC has advanced several of the administration's most ambitious redevelopment projects, bringing new housing, infrastructure, and job opportunities to underserved neighborhoods throughout the 5 boroughs. Seth Pinsky is a graduate of Columbia College, where he majored in ancient history, and Harvard Law School. Most importantly, he serves as a striking example of commitment to public service. And so, Seth, we are very happy that you have accepted our invitation to return to your alma mater today. Everyone, please join me in welcoming President of the New York City Economic Development Corporation, Mr. Seth W. Pinsky.
Thank you very much for those kind words. I want to begin by congratulating all of you on your hard work and success. It's truly an honor and a privilege for me to be here with you today, and not just because you're any set of graduates, but because you are graduates of this particular university, a university with which I feel a very close connection. As mentioned, I graduated from Columbia College in the early 1990s and have had for the past 2 years the distinct pleasure of serving as an adjunct professor at SEPA. But my connection to Columbia runs even deeper than that. My uncle graduated from the School of Engineering in the 1960s, and my grandfather from the law school in the 1930s. So, standing here before you today, I feel not just your presence and my presence, but the presence of those who came before us, the unmistakable presence of memory, of history, which I think is an appropriate presence to feel on a day such as today, because though graduations are frequently referred to as commencements, in my experience, there are also very much opportunities for reflection, for summation, a chance for us to look backwards before we move forwards, which is what I would like to take a few minutes to do here this afternoon with you. In my case, looking back not just over the past few years, but over the past couple of decades, back to the time when I sat where you sit today at my own class day in 1993. At the time of my class day in the early 1990s, we were living through a period of great change, both at home and abroad. And as is always the case when one is in the midst of the whirlwind, it was unclear where those changes would lead us, whether they would be a source for good or for ill, or something in between. What was clear to most, though, was that the era through which we were living was one that would likely alter the course of history, or, according to some, even end it. With the fall of the Soviet Union and the former East Bloc, our nation's great nemeses were suddenly and stunningly vanquished. And as the curtain fell on the Iron Curtain, a decades-long competition between not just two great coalitions of nations, but two opposing worldviews also faded into memory. And yet, surprisingly, in 1993, even though much of what the United States had spent the previous half-century advocating for, agitating for, even fighting for, was actually coming to fruition, here at home, we Americans were clearly and distinctly suffering from a sense of uncertainty, of disquietude. In the White House, a relatively new president faced a slow recovery after a lingering recession that had been brought on, at least in part, by financial institutions that had bet too heavily on real estate. On Capitol Hill, Congress grappled with mounting debt as deep and deepening divisions between the parties seemed to drive lawmakers toward distraction rather than solutions. And among much of the citizenry, there was a real fear that, having won the Cold War, our country was about to face domination from a new rival, one from the East, as books and newspapers heralded the coming Japanese century, and investors from across the Pacific snapped up trophy properties from Rockefeller Center to Pebble Beach. Looking around today, 18 years later, it is amazing how much has changed. From ubiquitous smartphones to high-speed internet to global social networks that are transforming how we relate one to the other. And yet, it's also astonishing to observe the similarities between the world at the dawn of the 21st century and the world at the twilight of the 20th. Globally, autocratic regimes are once again tumbling as thousands of citizens rise up, calling for the demise of dictatorships, though today the power of the people is playing out not on the streets of Warsaw and Prague, but in the souks and squares of Tunis and Cairo. And once again, even as the forces of freedom seemingly sweep the globe, we in the United States, the self-proclaimed home of the free, we are once again uncertain. At home, a relatively new president is once again struggling to lift the nation out of a long and painful recession, induced at least in part by that familiar and volatile cocktail of finance and real estate. And in the 1990s, and as in the 1990s, we are again struggling with a ballooning budget deficit as Democrats and Republicans seem more intent to score political points in the press than to work together to overcome our real underlying problems. And finally, though today, for multiple reasons, our perspective on Japan is quite different from what it was just 2 decades ago, we again face a serious competitor from across the Pacific, this time in the guise of the People's Republic of China. So what can we make of these parallels? Should we take solace from the fact that we as a nation not only managed to overcome the challenges that we faced in the early 1990s, but that we emerged by the end of the 20th century as the strongest, most prosperous, most powerful nation on earth, an unchallenged economic, technological, and military dynamo? Or even better, does our success in pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps some 20 years ago somehow foretell a similar outcome to the struggles that we face today? Perhaps we're just genetically programmed as a people to meet our nation's obstacles with success. On this day of your graduation, I'd like to be able to tell you that I believe that to be the case. But unfortunately, the famous dictum attributed to Santayana, dooming those who do not learn from history to repeat it, that dictum does not necessarily mean that superficially similar scenarios guarantee the same outcome in all situations. Or, as the mutual fund industry likes to remind us, past performance really cannot be taken to be an indicator of future results. And superficial similarities aside, I think most of us would agree that, in fact, today is a different day than the one on which I graduated 2 decades ago, and that the challenges that we face as a nation as you graduate are not the same as those that we faced when I did. Are they more significant? Are they less significant? In some ways, judging whether the challenges of one era are more substantial than those of another is, to steal a phrase from Justice Antonin Scalia, like judging whether a particular line is longer than a particular rock is heavy. Even so, I must admit that these are questions that I have found myself pondering of late. For from my vantage point, the vantage point of one who has been lucky enough to be placed in a position of public trust, and therefore to be afforded a unique opportunity to meet with and hear from a range of leaders and citizens in recent years. From that vantage point, I do get the distinct feeling that the challenges that we as a nation face today are categorically different, and maybe even more serious than those of the past. Which is why I was so thrilled when I was asked to speak to you as part of your commencement today. Because I really believe that today is not just an important day for you. It is, in fact, an important day for us and this country. And because the generation of leaders that have preceded you have done such a poor job positioning this country for that future, I believe that how that future plays out, in many ways, rests in your hands. Your hands as the rising generation, your hands as soon-to-be graduates. A tall order? I suppose so. But I really do believe that if you, as the class of 2011, do not succeed, it is unclear exactly who can and who will. Fortunately, there is, I believe, a recipe for success, a recipe that, after a few brief observations, I'd like to share with you. So first, my observations. I was appointed the president of the New York City Economic Development Corporation in 2008, and as you heard, within just a few short months of my appointment, in what I hope is a coincidence and not a causal relationship, Lehman Brothers collapsed, ushering in one of the worst economic downturns in recent history. As challenging as this downturn has proven to be, it has also proven to be an incredible opportunity for me, an opportunity to witness history from a front row seat, an opportunity to gain insights into how human beings adapt to new facts and circumstances, and an opportunity to learn how complex organizations, whether they be economic development entities, cities, or even nations, cope or don't cope with enormous stress. In certain respects, what I have seen has been heartening. For example, the recession here in New York has turned out to be significantly shallower than it was nationwide, while our recovery has been more robust. This is, of course, largely due to a complex cocktail of long-term policy decisions and macroeconomic trends outside of the control of any single individual or organization. However, in observing the city's economic performance over the last couple of years, there is, I think, another reason that must be credited, at least in part, for our relative success. Specifically, I would point to the lingering spirit of communalism and cooperation that blossomed so unexpectedly throughout our city after the attacks of September 11th, 2001. As a result of that, here in New York City, during the recession, even as some of our largest and most important institutions were crumbling around us, what I witnessed time and again was citizens of our city banding together for the good of our city, demonstrating in both word and in deed a belief that the chances of recovery must be greater if we stand united rather than divided. And what of the rest of the nation? In my role as president of the Economic Development Corporation, As I've had the chance to meet with leaders in Washington or to travel to cities across the nation, have I witnessed a similar phenomenon? Though, of course, it's impossible to make blanket observations about a country as large as ours, I do think that it's fair to say that on the whole, today in the United States, the answer to this question is more often no than yes, which in my opinion is disturbing. For we seem to be turning into a people that is unwilling or unable even to analyze what exactly our challenges are, let alone to come to terms with our own culpability or how we can be a part of the solution. But fortunately, our nation now has another chance at redemption, and that chance is, as I indicated earlier, all of you. For today, you are in a unique position as graduates. Though I know that coming from the School of Continuing Education, each of you is at a different point in your life and in your career, as graduates, you all share one thing in common. Namely, you are at the beginning of a new journey. And as intrepid travelers about to embark on this new journey, you are uniquely suited to see the world through fresh eyes, forsaking accepted wisdom in favor of innovative ways of thinking. And so, let me today offer you advice on confronting challenge. Advice that I hope will serve you well, not just in your civic role as members of what I hope will be our nation's next great generation, but in your personal and professional lives as well. In my opinion, in addressing any challenge, the first and most critical step always is acknowledging that a problem exists. Though this may seem obvious to many of you, I have witnessed that for many, this is the hardest step of all to take, especially at the critical moment when trouble is still brewing, but crisis lies somewhere beyond the horizon. Why is taking this step so difficult? Because often the period before a problem becomes apparent is one in which bad behavior actually provides a temporary sense of euphoria. Just as a hangover is frequently preceded by drunken revelry, so too the seeds of crisis are often sown in periods that have attached to them the aura of prosperity and plenty. But in the midst of such periods of prosperity and plenty, we should always be wary, always asking ourselves, is our situation sustainable, or are we simply living on borrowed time? If, prior to 2008, we had been honest with ourselves and asked, in the case of our national economy, how it could possibly be that we could pay for ballooning entitlements and multiple wars and yet also cut taxes, or in the case of our personal lives, if we had asked how we could stretch our credit to the limit on wasteful consumption and still expect to be able to afford retirement, imagine how different the past couple of years might have been. And so, today, I urge you, as you go forth from Columbia, commit yourselves to constant, sober-minded evaluation. Don't be afraid to ask questions, especially when something doesn't sit well with you. And never, ever trust people when they tell you that things will be different this time because fundamental rules have changed. Which brings me to the second step that I hope each of you will take in your lives as you address challenges. Specifically, after acknowledging the existence of a problem, the next step must be to ask a short but potentially awkward question. Am I responsible for this problem, either in whole or in part? Unfortunately, in America today, we're very quick to point fingers at others and exceedingly slow to acknowledge our own culpability. So, for example, as our mortgage crisis has unfolded, advocates for the poor have been swift to blame predatory lenders, while proponents of the unfettered marketplace have consistently pointed fingers at irresponsible borrowers. And yet, in my opinion, in the case of the mortgage crisis, in the case of our entire financial meltdown, as is the case with many complicated challenges, the truth is not that you or you were responsible, but that we all were. We all bought into a system that promised us something for nothing, managed our personal finances as if tomorrow would never come, and elected leaders who similarly managed our state and national budgets. But why is this important? Why in the face of challenge must we assign blame? The reason, in my opinion, is that until one has the maturity to come to terms with one's own complicity, one will never be ready to accept that the obligation to find a solution rests not just with others, but with oneself as well. Which leads me to the final step in this three-step process, namely, developing solutions that really address underlying problems, and that spread the burdens of these solutions evenly and fairly, rather than shifting them entirely to the other. Today in America, I would give us a just passing grade on step one. It seems that as a nation, we are at last coming to terms with the fact that there are, in fact, serious underlying problems that we collectively face. On step two, in most cases, I would say we're failing miserably. However, self-criticism has never been easy for any nation at any time. So though we may be failing, I can't say it's entirely surprising. What is most discouraging and disturbing to me, though, is the fact that when it comes to step three, we not only are failing, it doesn't even appear that most of us are trying. Take, for example, the looming crisis that we as a nation face in retiree benefits, both public and private. On the one hand, advocates for labor insist that those they represent receive every penny that they were promised, regardless of who is paying these pennies, regardless of what is being sacrificed to ensure that those pennies land in the pockets of the applicable beneficiaries. Meanwhile, on the other hand, those seeking to control retiree costs act as if these benefits were seized rather than bargained for. And even putting responsibility aside, they never calculate the economic cost of essentially wiping billions or even trillions of dollars in assumed assets from the books of millions upon millions of Americans. Which is why all of you should listen closely to our national dialogue. For only when you start to hear management acknowledging that the cost of a solution will have to be spread fairly, and you hear labor acknowledge that the cost of a solution will have to be, that the cost of labor will have to be restructured, only then will you know that we are beginning to move from fantasy towards real fixes. And if I were you, I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for the generation of leaders that has preceded you to make this transition. For somehow in the last decade or two, we in America have fallen prey to the belief that simple, costless solutions exist for complicated, endemic problems. But as you leave Columbia, please keep the following in mind, both in your roles as future leaders of our country and in whatever other roles you assume in your lives. Complicated problems almost always require complicated solutions. Solving problems is hard work, and solving really big problems is really hard work. And hard work takes time. But in the long run, the only thing that is harder than solving a problem is dealing with the consequences of pretending that a problem doesn't exist and hoping that it goes away. In 1961, John Kennedy stood before the United States Capitol and delivered one of the most famous inaugural addresses in our nation's history. In it, he proclaimed that the torch had been passed to a new generation of Americans. As it turns out, the passing of torches is not, in and of itself, a momentous occurrence. It happens as regularly as the turning of the seasons. It is as much a part of life as the cycle of birth and death. What is momentous, though, is when a generational torch is passed and the new generation uses the torch it receives to illuminate the world in a new way. Today, another torch is being passed, this time to you. By absorbing the decades of the lessons of the past decade and committing yourselves to pursuing honest self-evaluation, to using the tools that you have been given through the incredible education all of you have received here at Columbia to solve problems, to really solve problems, I believe that each and every one of you is capable of making this torch passing one of those rare instances that is actually transformative. So, as you're handed your diplomas, I hope that you will view them not just as pieces of parchment to frame and hang on your walls, but as a metaphorical embodiment of the torch that you are receiving from those that came before you. I therefore urge you to make this passage one that is not simply the turning of a page, but the changing of a chapter. The time is yours, and your opportunity is limited only by the expectations that you set for yourselves. By reaching this critical milestone, you have all shown that you are capable of incredible things. Now, it is up to you to fulfill your destinies, both individually and collectively. Congratulations, and the best of luck in all of your endeavors.
We will now ask the program directors to name the candidates for degree. Joseph Sikowski, SCE Alumni President, will present the alumni pin to each candidate. Actual diplomas will be conferred tomorrow by President Lee Bollinger at University Commencement. We begin with Noor Raja, Director of the Actuarial Science Program.
Will the candidates for the Masters in Actuarial Science please rise and come forward? I will now present the candidates for the Masters in Actuarial Science. Michael Davidson. Brenda Wu. Kwun Swen Mew. Tilia Tanner. Yun Jian Pan. Min Ji Chang. Fang Zhang. Jin Liu. Seonggil Han. Zhang Sun. Lloyd Narciso. How you doing? Matthew Rudman. I now introduce Trudy Baldwin, Director of the Communications Practice and Strategic Communications Program.
Thank you, Noor. Dean Bill Meyer, it's my distinct pleasure to present to you candidates for the Master of Science degree in Communications Practice and candidates for the Master of Science degree in Strategic Communications. Emily Helmke. Danielette Dennis. Faiza Giovanni. Stacy Beethan. Devin O'Loughlin. Now the candidates for the degree Master of Science in Strategic Communications. Raphael Sulit. Karen Gerzon, Catherine Hahn, Anna Cuiza, Laureen Ellison, John Normoyle, Lena M. Danan, Vita Rosie Calagaro, Allison Clark, Anne Folk, Sonal Adav, Lara Galinsky, Erin Barnes, Victoria Fullard, J. Martin Williams, Anania Maike, Kirsten Plana Beatus, Anastasia Anashkina, Shadi Salehi, Stephanie Marone, Suzanne Rowland, Lauren M. Scott, Daniel T. Reagan. I'd like to ask Dennis Green to come up. Dennis is the director of the Executive Master of Science in Technology Management, the Master of Science in Information Digital Resource Management, and the Master of Science in Construction Administration.
Dean Bill Meyer, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce the candidates first for the Master of Science in Construction Administration. Kurt Christian Decker, Omar Hamati, Pius Kwarteng Panqua, Andis Woodleaf, Jonathan Fiato, Omar Abdullah, Satya Belor Madivala, Roberto Alejandro Ortega, Saravanan, Bala Gubramananian. I did my best. Okay. Terry Levy, Kathleen Patricia Ryder, Nabil Naqvi, Mohammed Bhutta, Benjamin Wolferman, Albert Yangorasov, Sofia Piluras, John Hardcastle, Marco Williamson, Ali Davis, Kelvin Veridiano Baldivia, Nathaniel Andre Larea, Felix Ramirez, Katiana Anglade, Robert Musco, Matt Hyde, Jedediah James Gallagher. Now I would like to welcome the candidates for the Master of Science degree in Information and Digital Resource Management. Francisco Nogueras, Randy Torres, Erica Dowge, Ilya Pisman. Emily Pirel, and Lydia McCarthy. I would now ask the candidates for the master's degree, the Executive Master of Science in Technology Management. Nadir Ahmed, Charles Sochi, Deepak Goel, Santosh Dubey, Manny Govin, Leo Fida, Edward Sander, Kevin Bluer, Enrico Cananinden, Laron Andrews, Thomas Ciardello, Mohammed Al-Hussein, Vincent Cordo, Jean Koff, Francine Jackson, Rafael Perez, Neil Johnson, Svetlana Shyster, Errol Lindsay, Farouk Ajmal, Ramandeep Bathakwar, Jonathan Schwartz, Ryan Tang, Jim Sheldrick, George Perez, Rickard Mikalinich, John Lee, Wanda Bielosabaski, Thomas Dunn, Josh Gluck, Elsa Wang, Arun Arora, Michael Grinberg, Manoj Poleri, Yao Wang, Spencer Giacalone, Visanu Swaprutasashati. I practiced that for hours.
Thank you.
Mehmet Mutlu, Ikem Emiles, Carla Casper. I would now like to introduce Lukas Reuben, the Director for the Sports Management and Fundraising Management Programs.
Will the candidates for the degrees of Master of Science in Fundraising Management and Sports Management please rise? Dean Bill Meyer, faculty and staff of the School of Continuing Education, family and friends, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce the candidates for the degree of Master of Science in Fundraising Management. Hannah Yang, Sybil Britton, Melinda Logan, Tracy Saunders, Janie Azoria, Jason Cummings, Elisa Lamont, Kaylin Frame, Mary Ryan, Josh Hoffman, Sarah Cantwell, Lisa M. Johnson, Esperanza Soriano, and Nancy Mathiasen. Richard Von Bargen, and Jennifer Ann Fraley. Now, Candidates for the degree of Master of Science in Sports Management, please rise. Once again, Dean Bill Meyer, faculty and staff of the School of Continuing Education, family and friends, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce the candidates for Master of Science degree in Sports Management. Priya Trivedi, Joseph Loomis, Paul Jeffries, Inat Ben-Avi, Sean Foster, A.J. Goodman, Phil Aletto, Kelly Flanagan, Eric Weber, Sean Pollock, James Hahn, Finel Petitfrère, Jennifer Dick, Jason Brum, Brendan Buckley, Bill Wiswesser, Abigail Passeri, Delilah DiCrescenzo, Mark Harmson, Daniel Truax, Damian Rodriguez, and Pete McHugh. Now I'd like to introduce Joseph Desponzio, Director of the Master of Science program in Landscape Design.
Will the candidates for the Master of Science degree in Landscape Design please rise and come forward? Dean Bill Meyer, family and friends, fellow colleagues and staff of the School of Continuing Education, I'm really pleased to introduce the candidates for the Master of Science Landscape Design. Nida Aniche, Margaret Adams, Lulu Almana, Joanna Karanikas, Emily Phillips, Sarah Stalker, Janet Kopczynski, Eugene S. Profanato, Ronald Wendt, yeah, and Brittany Zuckerman. Now I'd like to introduce Beth Fisher Yoshida, Director of the Program of Negotiation and Conflict Resolution.
It is now my profound honor to ask the Master of Science candidates in Negotiation and Conflict Resolution to please rise and come forward. Fahad Khalid Al-Saud. Everett Sherman. Jonathan Chang. Savon Guerin. Clarence D. Coaxum. Max Shapnick. Adriana Lawrence. Lori Besson. Kate Townsend. Alan Poole. John Norman Saunders. Mir Namatullah Sadat. Catherine Gentile and Olivia. Brian N. Gibson. Ashley Michelle Rossi. David Robbins. Brian Meese. Cosette Yvonne Choquet. Donna Quilty. Christopher M. Wong. Camille R. Valentin. Marie Carmen Acoro. Loretta Liu. Mallory Jones Stevens. Meredith Collins. Catherine Gelman. Michelle Jackson. Alon Hillel Tuck. Mikhail Billick. Tony Tsang. Patricia Haynes. Natalia Lankovich. Sky Roper. Diana Para. Carmen D. Maltavo. Patricia Garavito. Go ahead. Samson Ungunloe. Kalika Thomas. Kimberly Rogers. Jennifer D. Asakas. Maria Luisa Gazzi. It is now my honor to introduce Craig Irvine, the director of the Narrative Medicine Program.
Will the candidates for the degree of a Master of Science in Narrative Medicine please rise and come forward? It is my distinct pleasure to present the candidates for the degree of the Masters of Science in Narrative Medicine. Mark Kistler. Jocelyn Zhao. Shannon Arnfeld. Jennifer Anyubinam. Jennifer Sotsky. Jillian Graham. Holly Kaczynski. Tavis Apramian. Christopher Salib. Ruth Philippi. Quinn Long. I'd like to now introduce Stephen Cohen, who is the director of the Program for Sustainability Management.
Will the first ever graduates of the Columbia University Masters of Science Program in Sustainability Management please come forward? It is my honor to present these first three intrepid souls. Kathy Ressler. Shinsuke Nuriya. Jack Tirako.
Thank you.
And now I am proud to introduce our 2011 School Ceremony student speaker, Ms. Brittany Zuckerman, soon-to-be graduate of the Landscape Design Program.
I sit completely still, fixated and waiting. It is not long before I see his plump little body zip past. As the sun recedes across the skyline, I noticed a golden log packed behind his kneecap. It is almost time to go home and dance because that pollen log is starting to look heavy. The honeybee performs a sequence of movement when he returns to the hive, alerting the colony where the pollen source is. He moves his body perpendicular to the sun, showing the other bees his navigational path. 4 years ago, I started watching, cataloging, and reporting on New York City's bee population for the Museum of Natural History. This was a time in my life when silence was more powerful than noise and stillness more powerful than movement. It was about the importance of the observed moment. As a dancer, I think about moving through space, the tension between the void, the pattern, the accent, entrance, egress. Watching the bee, I began to understand the correlation between choreography, the natural environment, and space. This revelation led me to enroll in Columbia's program in landscape design. Having already received my undergraduate degree in interdisciplinary studies from NYU Gallatin, I had the foundation of a great breadth of subjects. However, I desired a graduate program that would compel me to transform that knowledge into practice. Theories are only good if they can be implemented. Rather than be paralyzed by a singular discipline's borders, at Columbia's School of Continuing Education, we are able to parlay that knowledge, erode barriers, and transform the dialogue. The school's approach to multidisciplinary and applied studies asked me to not only think about the crux of matters, but to have the imagination to solve, build, and create their solutions. Where others may see a gas station in Croton, New York, my professor asked me to imagine it as a sustainable fueling station, complete with green roof, solar panels, rain garden, and natural plantings. Our designs would have transformed this concrete gas station into a gateway for the residents and commuters of Croton. As landscape designers, we are not simply placing trees and shrubs in artful ways. Once my classmates and I had to become anthropologists and investigate the heavily West Indian and Caribbean residents in the heart of Brooklyn so that they would have connected with our intended design space. At one point, I thought I had missed my calling as an environmental scientist as I was researching the particular differences of a bog versus a fen in Beacon, New York, for a waterfront restoration on which I was working. But I wouldn't have been able to create successful work without eroding those disciplinary barriers. Life isn't neatly packaged into categories and disciplines. Instead, as students, we get to play with the amalgamation of many disciplines, and our professors compel us to do so by pondering key questions like, how do we as designers make sure that our design solutions do not come at the expense of local traditions, cultures, and environments? Our graduation signals a new chapter in our own personal narrative and a new chapter for society. Many of us will leave Columbia and try to forge new paths in our respective fields. Whether it's sustainable building practices that will make for greener, more efficient housing, or better managed construction sites that are creating the cities of the future, or landscape designs that harvest rainwater for irrigation. We are at a crossroads where we are deciding what makes a healthy society. Many of us will help start that discussion and furthermore help articulate the solutions. The problems we face are complex and require interdisciplinary solutions. The clustering of like-mindedness is tearing us apart. We have sorted ourselves economically, geographically, and politically into communities of groupthink. As a result, this not only hinders new thought, it has us caught in a proverbial hamster wheel. Global warming cannot only be solved by scientists or recycling programs or new architecture. It needs an interdisciplinary eye. This requires teamwork and curious problem solvers. We are the people that will tackle these types of issues and question conventional wisdom. I think it is easy to be nostalgic for a simpler past, one that is free of the conflicts of modernity. But we are a generation of graduates that isn't nostalgic. We are excited to tackle the problems of the now. While we know modern complexities will cause new challenges that need solutions, facing these challenges also creates a more rewarding world. I, for one, can't wait to get on top of a roof to create a garden that will help with urban heat index. And I bet similarly, the narrative medicine students can't wait to influence policymakers about the ethical, social, and legal implications of advancements in public health. Just as the sustainability management and construction admin grads can't wait to rethink organizational and building design, and the communications professionals are primed to frame the debate, and the fundraising grads are itching to create new and innovative funding sources to fuel change. Indeed, all of you here, regardless of your chosen professional path, are poised to create and execute solutions to the challenges ahead. For many, our studies at Columbia have been an exhausting, rewarding, and amazing achievement. This ceremony is the culmination of years of arduous thought and work. As graduates, we are intellectually aggressive and furiously passionate about our concentrations. Columbia is hard, and it has a grueling learning curve. The hard things in life are what reap us the biggest rewards. They're what force us to have courage and the imagination to succeed. So I'd like to take a moment to congratulate the class of 2011. Furthermore, I'd like to thank those at today's celebration who made it possible, our parents, partners, and friends. I'd also like to thank our professors. It has been a pleasure to be in your classroom. You've inspired me and challenged me to look through different spheres of influence. And now returning to the bee. From watching him, I learned how he symbolizes a higher self due to the ultimate consequences of his tireless work ethic. That day, a few years ago, with the setting sun, I learned I wasn't simply bee watching. I was seeing the amazing transmutation of pollen into honey, or metaphorically, the conversion of knowledge into solutions. Like me, I hope you will all find your revelatory bee watching moment, one that will lead you to think about public space, our connection to nature, and our need for better planned cities. So I will leave you with this challenge. Don't let the noise of the world, what we are supposed to be doing, dampen your thought. Have the courage to embrace the subtleties between the disciplines. Paul Hawking writes, Emerson asked us what would we do if the stars came out once every 1,000 years. We would be ecstatic, elated, no one would sleep. We would be completely overwhelmed with the magic and evidence of God. Instead, the stars come out every night, and we watch television. So let us roar defiance at habits of thought and be obstinate dreamers that are able to see the magic between seemingly unrelated schools of thought. I hope all of you keep chasing after your metaphorical bee. Congratulations, class of 2011. I can't wait to see what all of us can do.
I now call to the podium Jonathan Chang, graduating student from the Negotiation and Conflict Resolution Program, who will present the class of 2011 gift, the first class gift ever.
Thank you. It is my honor to represent the graduating class of 2011 in presenting to you the first graduation gift. We're excited that the gift will be used to continually expand the school's excellent array of academic programs, its world-class faculty, its scholarship opportunity for new students, please accept this check for $10,000 from all of us. Thank you.
Jonathan and graduating students, I am deeply honored by this most generous gift, and I thank you for your commitment to your school. Thank you. Degree candidates of the class of 2011, Columbia has benefited from your extraordinary contribution to life and learning on this campus. You've heard from 3 wonderful speakers today who serve as outstanding role models. Now, it's time to take your great educational accomplishment and put it in service of the greater good. My congratulations again to all of you. And this brings us to the end of the formal part of the ceremony. Would the audience kindly remain in place until the conclusion of the recessional? And now, let the music begin.